Tell me about one of the sensory, sensual details in Hunger.
Welcome to Groovy Movies. My name is Lily Austin.
And my name's James Brailsford. Hello.
Hello. How are you, James?
I'm not too bad, thank you. Not too bad. Just, been seeing what's coming up on the horizon film-wise, and there's not been a lot grabbing me, immediately. What about yourself?
I'm quite interested in this Mother's Instinct.
Oh, yes, I missed that. Does look quite interesting. That's kind of snuck up on me. I didn't know much
same.
about it.
I thought it was coming out in a few weeks, but it came out last week, and I think the reviews are quite mixed. My site is saying,
It's directed by a cinematographer, Bruno Debonel. So visually, I'm expecting it to look incredible.
Oh,
So
cool.
it could be worth it just for the eye candy that I'm hoping.
I mean, honestly, it feels a bit from the trailer. It looks in the same vein as Mommy Dearest, and probably won't be as bad as that. I'm sure we'd have heard about it if it was. But I'm like, if it is that bad, I'm here for it. And if it's filmed well, like you say, if it's great cinematography, then what more can you want?
I'm certainly interested in checking it out, that's for sure. I just hope it's on a good quality screen, because if it is a visual spectacle, I want it to look good, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And Godzilla times Kong. I keep stumbling over that because it's such a terrible title. Like it's not clear how to say it, but it is. I looked at various YouTube reviews to try and figure it out, and the first two I looked at, neither of them said the title of the film. I feel like everyone's on the same page. But Godzilla times Kong, the New Empire, right?
Yes, I think that's right. I suspect it's not versus, because I'm guessing they don't fight each other so much as they team up.
Well, my research tells me, I love that it's clear neither of us have watched this film. We're not invested in this monsterverse, but it's the sequel to Godzilla versus Kong. They were against each other, and now they're working as a team.
I normally keep my hand in, even if it's just a little bit, reading the synopsis of most of the franchises, even if I don't watch them. Like I've never watched a Fast and Furious, but I kind of roughly, vaguely know. Whereas the Monsterverse, I ain't got a bloody clue what's going on.
I mean, it would have completely passed me by if it weren't for the fact that it's been making headlines because it made 194 million worldwide this weekend. So that's 25% more than June Part 2.
Yeah, now that really caught my eye, and I've been digging into Box Office Mojo, which is one of my favorite places to go, because I always like to see what you can figure out or infer from how well it's done in the box office in various parts of the world over time. Does it have legs, all that kind of stuff? I kept seeing the trailers for Godzilla X Kong New Empire. I started to see it was getting trailed everywhere, and every trailer, every time I saw it, it just looked like just generic noise on screen. Like there was so much CGI and so much Derman Strang, so much like everything's like at the max. None of it just washed over me, you know? I mean, I love a good blockbuster, I love a good spectacle, but this just went very generic. It didn't excite anything in me, so I was as surprised as I'm sure a lot of people were that it's done so well, especially off the back of what's being referred to as like superhero fatigue, which I know Godzilla vs. X Kong isn't a superhero, but it's definitely an action, fantasy, fighting-based film. It's like, it's got a lot in common.
It's definitely superhero adjacent. I've seen it referred to multiple times as a monsterverse film. So this is giving me great anxiety because I'm like, oh God, we seem to be just coming out of the superhero phase. Are we about to like dive straight into a new phase of monsterverse?
Well, if Hollywood's anything to go by, then yes, absolutely we are. Unfortunately.
It's surprising as well because from what I've seen, the reviews have not been good.
I've done some digging for both you and our listeners to get to the bottom of what the fuck is going on here. Why is it made mega stacks of cash? Because it doesn't make any sense, right? Because so I've looked into it, and I've also compared and contrasted with Dune Part 2, because this is the thing that it keeps getting compared to. And I've got a fairly solid-ish grasp on what's going on with Godzilla X Kong. One word: China. How much money has it made in China alone since release? Quick guess?
I mean, because you've said that, I'm gonna say 90 million.
Not quite as much as that, but
Oh no, I already took the lead out of your the wind out of your sail.
Just keep away from my boat, right? And no, it's made 44 million already.
Okay, that's
just from China alone.
That's amazing. That's quarter of its profit so far.
And that made me then think, wait, so is the reason that this film exists at all is predominantly for overseas markets? So then I looked at Godzilla versus Kong. And that made, over its lifetime in China, 188 million. So I was like, it made a fortune in China, the previous one. So I think this wasn't really made with much of an eye towards its domestic box office. You've also got, where is Godzilla, the franchise, where is it from originally? It's from Japan.
Right.
It also made, Godzilla versus Kong made, I think, $14 million in Japan alone. So I don't think it's been released in Japan yet, or at least I've not got any stats for the new one in Japan. But I suspect that it's kind of Asia Pacific and China audience and numbers are what prompted them to make this new film. It's made 80 million domestic so far. So its international haul of Godzilla X Kong is more than its American haul. So it's definitely been made for overseas, not really for its American audience.
Okay, well, we're overseas. Are we going to see it?
Fuck no. I mean, it's made 5.3 million, which is great for a UK release, but no.
Well, look, I'm very happy that there's been another successful box office film so soon after June. That's good for this year when we've been pranging out, worrying that it's going to be a tough year.
I agree with you that I'm very glad for theatres, because the thing I'm worried about this year are theatres surviving. Cineworld is absolutely on the thinnest dangling thread of about, I mean, it's already going through bankruptcy. I can't quite remember the official status, but it is on life support. It's really, really hanging in there.
Oh yeah, because didn't it go under during COVID or just after?
Well, just after. And so this year is unfortunately the year where we'll have less new material due to the knock-on effect of the strike. So if theatres go down, then there's nowhere to actually show the films to support the actors who went on strikes to get more money. So the whole ecosystem is very, very on just thin ice at the moment.
Yeah, so thank you, Godzilla, and thank you, King Kong.
Thank you, Godzilla. Yeah.
But on that happy note, to the main event. So last weekend was the 25th anniversary of 10 Things I Hate About You's release, a film notable for many reasons. Its surprisingly sound feminist principles and Heath Ledger's panty-dropping Frankie Valli rendition, to name a couple. Can you tell that I wrote the script? But it is the house party scene in the middle of the film that was our source of inspiration for this week's episode.
That's right. We thought long and hard to compile our top 5 party scenes in cinema.
So I guess we'll start with a bit of a definition, though I realised after we'd agreed on said definition, one of our entries breaks the rule, but it doesn't matter. Roughly speaking, we're talking about party scenes, not club scenes. So generally a private party, not a public party, though one of our choices is in a restaurant, but we're going to make an exception because it's futuristic.
It has the chaos and the madness of a house party. It certainly isn't some kind of slick nightclub sequence. So I think it gets in there just.
I think inevitably at some point we are going to explore our top 5 club scenes, because I think both these kinds of scenes are very hard to capture well in cinema. I think we all know of those movies you've watched and they go to a party or they go to a club and you can tell that the people aren't dancing to actual music.
Absolutely. It's very hard to make feel convincing, especially in a club. There's a very specific sound that a club has, that kind of echoey bassiness that is hard to get right. And then with house parties on screen, it's how it's shot. Does it feel authentic? Does it look like a set? Does it look like any kind of house you might have been to and the kind of characters who are there? There's a lot of elements that are required to make it kind of feel like it's something that you might have experienced yourself.
Okay, so I think we're already touching on a few of the things that make an excellent party scene. Do you think we should just dive in and then we'll explore as we go?
Yeah, absolutely.
So first on our list is one of my favorite films, and definitely it was the first party scene that came to my mind when thinking about this subject, and that is
that's interesting. Sorry.
That is the house party scene in 10 Things I Hate About You. Everyone, I think. It's an iconic scene for my generation, James. Like everyone knows this movie. We all watched it at school on like the last day of term and stuff. And
really?
Yeah.
So it was your Howard the Duck.
It was my Howard the Duck. Absolutely. Yeah. So can we, before I ask you your thoughts, can I just talk? I just want to refresh our listeners' memories of this iconic, incredible scene. So what I love about 10 Things I Hate About You and about this party scene is the setup is planted from the very start of the film. So we have the kind of quintessential new kid in high school introduced to everyone in school by someone nerdy who knows. So just like in Clueless, you have the walk and talk of like, this is that group, this is this group. These are all the different people at school. Here's who to avoid. Here are the losers. Here are the cool kids, etc., etc.
And that nerdy kid, by the way, did you by any chance recognize him? Because I was like, oh my God.
I've recognized him in something later on where I said you were in 10 Things I Hate About You, but now I can't remember what it was. What is it?
He plays Oppenheimer's best buddy in Oppenheimer, the guy he meets on the train, and the guy, and he's basically, it's like the same character. It's like a 1940s older version. He's the sidekick who's got the quips, but he's also a bit nerdy. Like Christopher Nolan was basically, give me that character from 10 Things I Hate About You, thanks, and action.
And there's another link because obviously Heath Ledger in Christopher Nolan's Batman.
And also
Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Yeah. I think Christopher Nolan must have been a huge fan of 10 Things I Hate About You.
I think so.
He's a man with great taste. So I forgive us for not knowing the name of that actor. But yeah, this guy walks Joseph Gordon-Levitt around the school saying, here are all the different groups. And he points out this group of kind of soon-to-be yuppies, yuppie nerds, let's call them. And he says, yesterday I was their god, but Bogey Lowenstein started this rumor about me, so now I'm on the outs. And he's like, don't worry, I'll get it.
I missed that detail.
It's only because I've watched it a million times. But that's what I love is that this plant is seeded.
Setup, payoff.
The seed is planted even, not this plant is seeded. Yes, about what's going to come later. Chicken and egg. And it's true, both kind of work. A seed is planted. Oh my God. Anyway. And
just a little side revelation for you there, Lily, and back on with the podcast. You can use
oh my God,
later.
This is major. For anyone listening, have you thought about that before? Because I haven't. My mind is blown. Okay, so then we move forward in the plot, and I won't go into all the details, but it's pertinent to the plot that there is a party to get these sisters that are the kind of the objects of their affection to go to. And this is the moment he uses. So Michael, he takes a flyer for Bogey Lowenstein's party, which is very much like a small party. It's not for everyone to be invited to, and makes out that it's like a free big house party with free booze. Everyone should come. And he's like throws these flyers out into the hall using an amazing needle drop of Sexy Boy by Air. And so all these kids descend on this house. And poor Bogey Lowenstein, he has this incredible mansion and it's overrun with kids playing music, drinking, smashing precious objects. And he's just like, there's this, throughout the party, you have this kind of vignette of this guy coming back, like wailing, trying to maintain his house and like keep a handle on everything. He knows he can't get them to leave. So he's just kind of being like, guys, please, careful. Oh, let me take that. I just love this little like through line of that throughout the party. Oh, yeah. It just adds another layer to it.
I've definitely been to a house party where it was meant to be a quiet party with not many people meant to turn up, and it got completely swamped. And in fact, I was there and somebody upstairs, I heard somebody in a room go, fuck, ran into the room, and they were basically, it was like they were half like disappeared into the floor and their foot had gone through a gap in the floorboards because the parents were doing some work on the house. And I remember running downstairs into the living room and I looked up just kind of to see it for myself, and the woman's foot was just dangling through the ceiling. And the parents had expected like a few of their close friends to come round, and this is what happened.
So that's the setup to this party. So what did you think of this scene, James?
I thought it was an absolutely fantastic movie house party scene. The fact that I even could recognize I've been in a similar situation, like swamping a party that was definitely meant to be a small affair. And I just think you get swept up in the kind of the atmosphere of it. It's nice and busy. There's lots of extras, lots of things going off in the party. It's like a high school teenagers kind of going a bit wild. I can't remember the actress's name who plays one of the two sisters, but towards the end of the sequence, she's got drunk and she starts dancing to, is it Notorious B.I.G.? G?
G?
B.I.G.
Yes, Julia Stiles. This is another reason why I love this scene, because the party kind of follows the two sisters, Bianca and Kat, as they're being pursued by different people. So you've got Patrick, Heath Ledger's character, pursuing Kat, and you've got Cameron and the douchey guy Joey pursuing Bianca, and you kind of follow these two strands through the party, and they're constantly on the move, which is just obviously just how it is in a party, right? You're constantly moving around trying to avoid someone, trying to see someone else, and like it's never ever sedentary. And then we get to this sort of peak where Kat is getting really drunk. She's just decided, like, fuck it, everyone wants me to be a certain way, so I'm just gonna like do it, and does a load of shots and then gets off on the table. And it's a fun. I love this dancing on the table moment because I really relate to that dancing. Like, it's not great. She's like, she's trying to be sexy. She's feeling herself because she's drunk, uninhibited, but her hands are up in the air. She's doing that classic white girl kind of waving your arms throughout dance, which I have to say I do all the time. She's then like dropping it low, and it would be embarrassing if it weren't for the fact that she is going for 100%. You know, there's no self-consciousness. She's just really in that moment. And I don't, so I find it like, even though it's obviously unfortunate because it's an alcohol-induced moment of reverie, it is kind of comedy gold because of the way she dances.
Relatable, Lily. You've been in that world, perhaps.
I definitely dance like that all the time, but mostly when I'm sober, honestly. I mean, I would love to fall into Heath Ledger's arms and him to be looking after me afterwards. It's great. And then through the film, you've got these switches, right? Because by the end of this scene, by the end of this house party, Kat realizes that actually she does quite like Patrick. And we see that Patrick isn't the scary guy that you think he is. There's complexity to why she is so hostile. I mean, it's not surprising, but you see that kind of come out. And then on Bianca's side, Bianca realizes that Joey, that cool guy, is actually just a loser who just like
boring,
mansplains.
self-absorbed.
Completely self-absorbed and boring. And whereas she realizes that Cameron is great, and Cameron realizes that Bianca is quite selfish, actually. So we have these great kind of flips of everyone.
It's very good for character switcheroos and everything. The scheming that goes on, the whole setup of how you've got to date this girl so that I can date the sister, and then, like you say, them realizing that they're not who they all thought they were. So there's lots of like masks that are being slipped during this party sequence. What makes it so good? And I love the sequence outside of the party, actually, on the swing where Julia Stiles is Kat. She throws it up, and then they have a moment with Heath Ledger's character. And in the background, behind them both, on this kind of, is it a swing that they're on? You know, you can see the house party behind them with all the extras and stuff. And that you know, it's a nice moment.
Yeah, it is a really nice moment. And again, also feels quite familiar, right? Because whenever you go to a house party, there's always a moment, many moments where you're like, this is all a bit much. This is enough. It's sensory overload. I need a minute to go outside. And you have the fresh air, a quiet moment with someone hopefully that you like, or a friend or something. Yep. And so I like that pulling away, but you can still hear the music in the background.
Oh, yeah.
I do think it's like the peak of there are so many good house parties. Like we discussed when we were coming out of our 5, we floated quite a few different house party scenes, right?
Yeah, yes, we did. I was rewatching the scene from Clueless, and it's a nice sequence, but it's not as big a scene as the one in 10 Things I Hate About You. You know, it's not as big a part of the film. Whereas in the 10 Things I Hate About You, it's like almost the center point of the film. And it's that where all the different characters come together. So it's naturally dramatically a bit bigger, but that means they've spent more money on it to make it look a bit more impressive. The fact that it's set in a rich person's mansion. So in Clueless, and also in 16 Candles, which is a John Hughes film that contains like a house party scene. They're much smaller scale. They don't feel as cinematic, and I think that's a mixture of the setting, that they're not set in a rich person's house, but also probably for the film, they don't want to spend as much money on these scenes because it's not as big a set piece like it is in 10 Things I Hate About You.
In Clueless, I feel like the reason they go for this smaller party in the valley thing is because Cher lives in a massive mansion. I feel like it's a good contrast to have a slightly alternative setting and like someone from her school. I think that kind of makes it work. I like the fact that it's a smaller place. It's this kind of little condo with a pool at the back. I think for me that makes it feel quite sort of plausible as well. I think that definitely works for Clueless, but because there's so much builds to this point in 10 Things I Hate About You.
This is what it's all leading up to as far as the kind of dramatic states have been building up to this moment here at the party. So everything's kind of hinging around it. And then after the party, the characters continue on their paths. There were a lot of things about the party scene in 10 Things I Hate About You that you could relate to. There's lots of little moments that felt true, but all of it was in an American setting filled with Hollywood kind of gloss. It was shot in a very beautiful, almost fantastical way. You can't imagine that anyone really had an American high school experience like that. However, I'm glad that I threw into the pot. As soon as you mentioned this as a theme, the very first thing that came into my mind was like, oh my God, the house party scene from Human Traffic, which I would say is the British counterpoint. If you want bringing down to grubby earth, then here we go.
I'll just say that what I like about 10 Things I Hate About You is like every other teen Hollywood movie of this time, and probably now even today, they're always set in a very affluent, predominantly kind of white middle class world. And I quite like that in 10 Things I Hate About You, even though it is still set in that, there is quite a bit of acknowledgement of that, throughout the film. So it does kind of, there's this intelligence and self-awareness to this film, which really, I think, is partly why people love it so much. It's like an idealized version of a house party. Like I can imagine,
which is what Hollywood,
going in a way.
The thing is, well, it's a house party you would love to go to. It's like, oh yeah, if I go to a house party, I want it to be like that,
Yes, but it feels clean, right? It doesn't feel like a grubby house party. And then we move to Human Traffic, and oh my God, it's reality. It's absolute reality.
It's almost a bit too reality. It has a ring of truth. So
set it up, James. Tell us about Human Traffic.
So Human Traffic is a film about the late 90s club culture, I think you could say. The director, Justin Kerrigan, went to Newport Film School, and he was basically a clubber himself. He said that he would go out clubbing at the weekend, then on his come down, he would spend basically midweek just writing up his adventures and things that had happened, conversations he'd had, and then he just kind of threw that all into a script. He said his first draft was 400 pages. The film certainly doesn't hold up as any kind of cinema classic. I absolutely loved it at the time. And I think the reason I loved it at the time is because I'd never seen a film that was trying to show that specifically the UK club culture and the club scene as it was.
I haven't heard of it, but I feel like it does hold up. I think it's doing some interesting things. Okay, I know that there are other things like Train Spotting or whatever that do the same thing.
I think I'm probably not talking about holding up culturally, because I think it's almost like a great time capsule. I think more just as me developing as a filmmaker / film appreciator, it's nowhere near the same level as Train Spotting as far as quote unquote the art of it. It's
I see what
quite
you mean.
Basic, but it doesn't stop it from being a fun ride. Don't get me wrong. I think it's worth a watch just to see, like, it's a perfect time capsule of the clubbing scenes. It's all about a bunch of mates who like going clubbing at the weekend and what that's like. I think it was the first film role of Danny Dyer. That's where I first saw Danny. And
watch it
he's
for a
fantastic.
Baby Danny Dyer. Like, he looks like he hasn't hit puberty yet. He's skinny as anything, and I think it's. I mean, I've not seen a lot of Danny Dyer, but I think it might be his acting high point.
I think it's the definitive Danny Dyer performance. I think he's perfect in it. It's almost like the ideal Danny Dyer role. And then, of course, John Sim plays the central character, who's a great actor. But this particular scene we're discussing is they've had a night out. It's clearly about 4 a.m. or something, and suddenly they've all got wind of a house party. So everybody's piling back to this random house party that's in like a mansion in the middle of nowhere.
And you have the protagonist you mentioned. Jip is with everyone in the car, driving them to this party. Clearly, like, off his face, he's like gurning. He's trying to keep his eyes wide. It's like, it's quite hectic. it does echo 10 Things I Hate About You, because they arrive at a mansion. And what's fun about it is that as they come into the house, they break the fourth wall. Everyone in this group turns to the camera as if it's someone else, another party going, being like, come in, like, we'll show you the party. And like, oh, it's like Dynasty. And the camera kind of spins around. And you agree. It's like, wow, this is like a massive house. This is so cool. What an amazing place to have an after party in. But it's also so grim. And everyone is so off their face, and it's so well done, because that is
it feels so authentic, because the guy did live that lifestyle. You can tell that this isn't somebody who got a script and they didn't know the subject matter at all. This is a film about the clubbing in the 90s, directed by a clubber from the 90s.
Yeah, it really feels that way, and in a way that makes me realize that most directors don't really. Or maybe it's just because this is something I understand a bit about. You know, I'm not a major club or anything, but the small details are so correct. The moment when there's this pause and they talk about like spliff politics, I think they call it, or something like that. And it's about the passing around a spliff and wanting to go on, so you start a conversation with the person. He knows what you're doing. He's like, I don't want to give it to him. And all of that was like, so many moments like this.
I love the bit where very early on, as they go around the mansion, occasionally we'll just cut to random people we don't know having a conversation, but our core group of friends, they're always orbiting around. It's almost like they're our tour guides around the ins and outs of a house party, which I love. And so there's a bit where there's two guys chatting and they're getting on really well, and then suddenly one of them takes a turn and is like, what do you mean about that? They've gone off on a paranoid trip. And the camera pans the entire group of friends and they just sing, that's paranoia. And it's like, that's the roller coaster of a house party.
I was a bit hungover when I was watching it, and I found it quite like torturous, like a bit of a painful watch, because it was it felt horribly familiar. When it's like, it's that bit where things start to, like, you're hitting your peak.
You've passed the peak. You
could see it. Because they have a couple of moments where Jip is with Coop and Nina is with her friend. I've forgotten her name. The other girl in the group. And they're obviously both like best friends, and they're having that, you know, when you're off your face, but you start talking about like deeper stuff and having a laugh, and they're flipping between the two of them. And you know that that's around the point where like things are starting to peak, and pretty soon you're going to be feeling like shit.
You got to get out of there. And I love it with Danny Dyer and the friend that he makes in the kitchen, because obviously all the best action happens in the kitchen. They're talking about Star Wars, and they're having these big revelations while they're taking hits from what looks like a bong of some description, and like, you know, they're getting all profound, and then the party goes past its peak and everyone's still trying to keep that peak going, but then it cuts to them and they're just trying to keep the conversation going. They're just like wrecks by this point. The magic was 2 hours ago, but you kept going.
And honestly, in that moment, you feel like you've really found a new friend and you've connected with someone that's going to mean something to you forever. And in fairness, that at the start, Jip says that he met Danny Dyer's character like last summer at a party. So there are moments when it does happen, right? I mean, that's how I know you, is for you meeting people and like, you know, and kind of adventure type party situations. But for the most part, it's definitely just in the moment because you're off your face. And so, seeing the and then the come down as the party progresses, and then you get to the come down, the music's off, everyone feels like shit, but you can't go to sleep. That's the thing, is that I feel like 10 Things I Hate About You, it looks like a lot of fun, so it's fun to be in it. And it's a great scene for, as we said, like progressing the plot along. With this, it's great because it's so real. It's like the opposite, you know?
Absolutely. And I was reading an article with Justin Kerrigan, the director, who I did actually meet in 2001 or 2002 when I was at film school. He came to do a panel about the film with the producer, I think some of the people who funded it. But there were more people on the panel than there were people in the audience. There were literally 4 people in the audience.
No.
So I know. And afterwards he came to the bar, and so we got chatting to him, which was quite cool, because, you know, he'd made fucking Human Traffic. And he said that it was just him writing down his experiences to just get the feel of what it was like to be clubbing in that time. So he said there's lots of scenes in the film that do not advance the plot or the narrative. And even that party scene, you could say, arguably, doesn't really advance much. It's like you're just kind of there with them and you're experiencing a night out. So it's very much, I hate to use this sounds way too grand a word to use for human traffic. It's very much about the experience of clubbing than it is about the kind of the stories behind it. The bits of narrative that are there are quite thin. They guide you through the various scrapes and adventures. If you want to know what it was like to have a wild night out in the 90s in the UK, human traffic's pretty great.
But that's why I like it, actually. What I like is that I'm the thing I'm least interested in is Jip, the protagonist, getting with that girl. Like it's cute for them. I'm happy for them. But it's a great film for just being that, just being a night out, and how everyone in a friendship group connects with each other through that. The thing that was striking for me was that it was cool watching a film that does feel, like you said, a total like time capsule of this moment, but actually it also feels very familiar. I don't think clubbing, or at least going to house parties, has changed all that much in the
Not really
24 years since, and that's nice. It's quite cool that there are very few things really that haven't changed that much, and I mean, in a way, it's cool watching an earlier phase of it, because I feel like the 90s, that whole sort of, I guess, ecstasy generation, that was kind of a novel new thing, right? And the whole thing of like parents being like, oh, they've obviously not been brought up right for their children to be doing that kind of thing. I feel like life is, that kind of thing has moved on quite a lot, like conversations around that have moved on quite a lot. So in some ways, it's cool to watch something where these are people in their early 20s feeling like they're the first generation to ever have a good time like this. And obviously every generation feels that way, but it's cool seeing that, and then seeing how that was something that I feel like everyone nailed, and it's continued in the same way ever since.
Especially with some of the other clips that we're going to discuss, which are going back a few decades. It speaks to, in the end, what we all enjoy. We all enjoy getting into the same room or the same house with a bunch of strangers and getting inebriated together and seeing what adventures unfold.
That's very true. Okay. On that note, I think we should swing back to, again, a very contrasting kind of party scene. We've talked about it before when we talked about this film, The Great Beauty, Sorrentino's movie from 2013.
I mean, this is the ultimate, like, decadent party. This is the one where you tell your friends, you wouldn't believe where I went last night. You might say you wouldn't believe what I got up to in Cardiff in the 90s, but you wouldn't believe what I got up into Italy. This is the decadent kind of hedonism.
Again, complete contrast to the reality of human traffic, because this is pure fantasy, really.
It's gloss, it's stylized, everything about it is manufactured to be, I don't know if it's meant to be appealing, but it certainly is very stylish, isn't it? You feel it's an aspirational party.
Yeah, it's a good question, actually. Is it meant to be appealing? Because in one way it is appealing, right? Like, it looks like a very fun, pulsating, energetic party, and everyone is very glamorous and shiny, and it's clean, unlike human traffic. But the people themselves, the men can be quite lecherous. The women all have this air that they think they are the most attractive woman at the party, and you're lucky to be even looking at them. Do you know what I mean? Everyone has that kind of face on them.
They've got a right face on.
Yeah, they really do. Yeah. Which I think it's very deliberate, right? I don't think you're meant to feel like it's an inviting...
Even visually, it's not a warm, inviting place. Even the visuals, it's got this kind of cold, steely blueness. I don't feel a warmth about these characters. I don't feel like I want to really be in their presence. And when you watch the film, they are kind of self-involved, quite shallow people. And the club kind of reflects that, is that it looks impressive, but really, I don't know, do you want to be part of that gang?
So kind of in contrast to the last two films, well, with Human Traffic, the whole film builds to this club scene, and then there's after party. And with 10 Things I Hate About You, it's kind of at the end of the second, third. So again, kind of a build to it. With this is very early on in the film. This scene introduces us to the lead character, Jet.
Yeah.
I just realized has a very similar name to Jip from Human Traffic. So
do you think he was inspired? Do you think Sorrentino was like, Definitely. I need to do an Italian riff on this. I need to do my response to Human Traffic.
I mean, that would make me so happy if that was actually what was going through his head, definitely. So Tony Servillo plays Jep Gambardella. And so we get introduced to him. It's at his 65th birthday party. And like you said, it's glamorous, but somewhat uninviting party. And I feel like the intro to him, he's like, I believe he's in sunglasses. All the women want to snog him, and they're like, yeah. And this woman jumps out of a cake. Everyone clearly thinks he's the most like fabulous guy, and I feel like it sort of sets up. You understand who this man is. He's like incredibly popular. He's prone to excess, just like this party. But yeah, there is this feeling that he's like shallow and a bit ludicrous, right? He's a man. This is his 65th birthday. Who has this kind of obscene party for their 65th birthday? And the voiceover comes in saying that he's a writer and he is Jep Gambardella. And I just thought, I feel like it's no wonder that it's only in these sorts of stories a writer's ever this fabulous. Like only a writer could create a character who is so kind of desired and so chic and cool, who is a writer, you know?
Yeah, when I watched the film originally, I was like, I thought that was kind of meant to be the joke, that he'd made this one book that he was dining out on for the rest of his kind of career. I thought that was meant to be part of the... I can't put my finger on it.
The first time I watched it, I think I was just so taken with what a great scene it was, because it also goes on longer than you expect. And then there's this whole dance thing where the men and the women do this kind of dance routine to each other. I
definitely would be out by that point. I'd be like, you know what, it was good for a bit, but then when the synchronized like group dancing happened, I just made my excuses and left, as they used to say in the tabloid newspapers.
See, I'd be right in there.
Right. I'll see you back at the bar, Lily. I'll see you back at the bar.
I would be absolutely communing with this group at that point, for sure. I think the subtlety and the tongue-in-cheekness, I think, slightly went over my head the first time I watched it. And I could really see it a lot more this time round, right? That I think these people are all a bit absurd and completely shallow.
But all think that they're somehow really deep.
Yes. The moment when that woman says... She refers to the woman who jumps out of the cage. She's like, what did she say? Oh, yeah, in total mental and physical decline. And you obviously, having watched this film before, I'm like, that's actually alluding to what this film is really about, which is like Rome's decline and all of these people's decline. But it's quite great. It's a good sort of setup of everyone looking at each other and judging them, but they are themselves just the same.
Absolutely. It
does a lot with what is a very fun scene to look at.
It's doing a lot, this party scene, whereas in Human Traffic is more about the experience. It's just putting you, this is what it was like, and let's have the experience you might have there. You'd have a laugh, you'd have some weird moments, and you might fall in love, all that stuff. Those things don't really happen. It's world building. Right at the start, it's saying this is the world that our characters inhabit, and this is normal, and this is what they look for in their lives.
I feel like if I'd have paid to see that film in the cinema, I'd already have felt like I've got my money's worth in that first few minutes, being treated to this kind of over the top, opulent, indulgent scene. So it's a fun thing, and you're right. Yeah, it does an awful lot to kind of allude to what's coming in the rest of the film.
Absolutely, and the sound design's great. But yeah, it's a bit of scene setting and world building. It does a lot.
All right. Well, shall we move on to our fourth top film, Playtime?
Absolutely. This was one which only came to me when you and I were brainstorming. I'm very glad it did, because I've always wanted to try and find an excuse to kind of get Playtime into the mix a little bit. Had you heard of it before we chatted about it?
No, I feel like we're going to have to revisit this film sort of in the round at another time.
Yes.
To kind of set it up, it came out in 1967, directed by Jacques Tati. Yeah. And it's a Monsieur Hulot movie, right? Yeah. And I know of Monsieur Hulot because it's one of my parents' references in life, actually. But I've never seen any of these films. I think they had the first one, the one about him going on a holiday or something.
Monsieur Hulot's Holiday.
Yeah.
I think that'll be it. And the thing is, just to give a bit of context here to people who might not know the character or the actor, is that this is a character who he performed for decades. So I think Monsieur Hulot's Holiday is from the 40s, and then there's Mon Oncle, which is one of his better known films from 1958. And then, of course, we have almost 10 years later, we have Playtime. And you see through the films as well. I've not watched, I think I've seen Monsieur Hulot's Holiday and Playtime, and that's it. I'm not some big fan, but I just know of them. He was a big celebrity in France, and so he had quite a lot of clout, and his films would make money at the box office. So all those things add up to, at some point in your career, you're going to get a blank check. And so Playtime was Jacques Tati's blank check Monsieur Hulot film.
And if that intrigues you as a concept, go back and listen to our blank checks episode from series 2. Do carry on.
Absolutely. This is what happens when Jacques Tati decides to basically go all in and make his masterpiece that wants to say stuff about capitalism, consumerism, the modern world, and be a slapstick comedy.
So I started by watching the link you sent me to this party scene.
Which is very short, I realised.
Very short.
Sorry.
No, it's quite all right. It was a good sort of first dipping my toe in. And it's like a lot of chaos. It's a hectic, chaotic party with a band playing and lots of people dressed up in their finest outfits, but really like dancing quite sort of almost violently. So it kind of reminded me of the party scene in Breakfast at Tiffany's, which was on my list as potentials for this top 5. I love that party scene. And I mean, part of the similarity is the fact that both are set and made in the 60s. And it made me realize that like the 60s is a very good time for a party scene, because it was this point in American culture and history where the kind of swinging era was coming in and people wanted to have a good time. Drugs were around and kind of becoming kind of widespread in a way that perhaps they hadn't before. But also people just, I think, were hungry for a wild time, and a good time.
Yep.
But they were still dressing quite nicely and formally for a party. So everyone's in like tux and the women are in pearls, their hair perfectly coiffed. They're in like a fitted cocktail dress, but they're like dancing furiously. The clothes aren't suited to what's going on. And I love that kind of contradiction, right?
It's the start of people are letting their hair down, but it's still within the conventions of what went before. So you may be dressed like your parents, but you're not acting like them.
But it was only then after watching that, I was like, okay, I think I need a bit more. So I went and I found a version online of the film where it had been like overdubbed a bit. So it's like mostly French, but it seems like a lot of the especially no. Or is that correct?
There are characters who speak in English, yeah. But it was all shot in France, and I'm assuming with French actors, so possibly they got dubbed over by,
I'm sure, because mostly you can hear the French, because a lot of the dialogue is almost like background, like for the whole of this quite long scene at this restaurant, because it's a party, but it's out of restaurant, right, with a band, and so people are coming in for dinner, and it's just as the scene builds and more chaos ensues, but most of the conversations between people are almost slightly like background conversations, so it's mostly French, and then you'll just suddenly hear some woman going, oh no, what is she wearing?
But when you look at those wide shots, you realize that everybody's got something to do. It's not like in most films where the extras are just kind of going through the motions and doing some background business. No, you can see that they've all been directed and they've all got little stories going on, so you can drift from one to the other. And they've all usually got some form of gag going on.
I've never seen such a crowded screen party scene.
Yeah.
You're right, because they do pull out quite a lot. And there's so much going on. It's like, it's full on to watch, because there's so much going on all the time.
And it builds and builds, but it's like a 40-minute scene that it just builds and builds and gets crazier and more hectic. And, this cost a fortune to make. In the show notes, there's some links to some people who were on the set as extras saying about how torturously slow it was. Like Tati would wait for the exact right light to happen, because he built 2 stories of the office block that you see. That's not a location. That was a built set on a studio lot that he'd bought, and the plan was he was going to make like Tati Land, and it was going to be just this complex where they were going to shoot loads and loads of films. And the idea being that Playtime would be this huge success, and the success of that would fund all of these things. And of course, it wasn't. It was a big flop, and it cost a fortune. So his ideas of big film studios kind of disappeared. And even the cars outside, all the cars and the roundabout, that's all been built specifically to an exact design. So it's all the right size, all the cars, everything is completely coordinated by him for exactly the effect he wants. There's no chance in any of the shots that you see, and everything has been orchestrated,
It's so impressive. It's a shame it was a flop, because I didn't know any of the backstory or the context. I didn't know anything about Jacques Tati, but reading about it, and so apparently the 60s in Paris, there was this whole push towards modernism. So buildings were being knocked down, and modern buildings in the sort of American style were being, high-rise buildings were starting to be built. And so Jacques Tati felt very sad about that. And so this film was sort of an ode to the Paris he knew and loved, with the old buildings, by creating a future Paris or a future France to show the chaos and the upshot of this kind of all-in consumerism.
And I think there's also something quite poignant about the fact that he chose to use his Monsieur Hulot character, because this is a character that the French people grew up with, that you can look at his earlier films and you see Monsieur Hulot as a young man who is in step with the times. The France that's depicted on Monsieur Hulot's Holiday is the France that his character is clearly most in tune with. And then you come to Playtime and his character is dwarfed by his environment. The modern world is like there's almost no space for him in the frame. He's always constantly trapped behind glass and, frames within frames. He's always usually isolated. So it's taken a character that French audiences may have known and loved and felt very close to, and then it's showing him suddenly out of step with the world that he's in, kind of playing on the theme that you picked up on from when you watched it.
Wow. See, it's interesting to watch something and then subsequently hear that kind of context of the film and what is actually going on there, because obviously watching that, not knowing any of that, I'm watching what it seems like, oh, this is so cool to see 60 years ago what was happening in the party scene, and like what I understand to be like where culture was at in the 60s. It's kind of cool to think that this was a film made by an older generation who's like looking at this as something he's not in step with.
And that he can easily ridicule. He's a comedian ultimately, and he's a physical comedian, and there's a lot of that throughout the film. It's not a slapstick comedy like you might imagine. There's a lot of thought that's going into it. Ultimately, he is a comedian, and it is a funny film, but there's a lot of thought going on behind it.
It is a very funny scene. Like, I did think that when we were watching, I was like, oh, it's good to have a kind of more pointedly comedic party scene, because that's the thing. It's like what we talk about, the chaos. There's just stuff going wrong all constantly in this, and it's like building and building, getting worse and worse and worse of people.
And like there's multiple characters who've all got different things going off. Like there's a waiter who swaps his trousers around with some other person, and that keeps building, and so every character has a thing that's kind of either it's a problem for them or they're trying to sort out, and those things all stack up and interact, and just to be able to pull that off as a director, I find it difficult when I've got more than two actors in a shot trying to arrange and time that, because everyone's got to hit their marks at the right time, especially in a big group scene. If somebody's covering up somebody else at the wrong time, then the joke doesn't land.
The party scene in that, like you said, was like 40 minutes of the film. It was the predominant part of the film.
Yeah.
And Lovers Rock, this is a film I wanted to pick because it was also like one of the first things that came to mind. But this is not just a scene. This is the whole film. This is part of the series that Steve McQueen made that came out in 2020. And the film is, I think it's an hour and 10 minutes. So it's like a short feature film, but it so perfectly captures a party that I just thought, like, this is the peak for me of all of these.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so glad you suggested this, because Small Axe, it's something that's been on my to-watch list and just never quite got round to it. So this was great that I watched this, and it's amazing. I loved it. It's beautifully directed by a master, and it's the sweet spot between it's very, very relatable, but also I definitely would like to be at that party more so. Like that's if I could choose out of all of these, I think that this is what I would love to be at.
I'm so glad we agree on that, because that was why I wanted. And we're not ranking these. These are just the five scenes out of I think not the huge amount, because like I said, I think it is very hard to do party scenes really well and for them to feel believable. And I think that is like the number one thing, that it has to be believable. But the this one for me is just because it, like you said, exactly. It's like, it's 100% plausible and believable, and has like with Human Traffic, it has some of the detail of a house party. I imagine in the 70s in London, that's where it's set.
I felt it was like early 80s, but that was just a feeling. I don't know if it's ever stated or anything, but if I had to put my finger, I'd say like early 80s.
I think maybe late. I know that the kind of the music, so Lovers Rock is like a genre of music, and that was kind of like mid 70s. But I mean, yeah, could have been early 80s. For me, because there was quite the clothing. Maybe you're right. I'm not sure. You know, I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what the era was.
But around that, but around late 70s, time. Early 80s.
Yeah. And the film starts with the prep for the party. So everyone, like the women cooking the food, men moving furniture and setting up the
sound
music.
System.
Yeah, getting out their records. And it being just very much clearly like someone's real home.
Everything about it felt authentic. And throughout the whole film, it's a very like sensory and sensual film. So there's one detail that I loved was when they're all dancing and the music's got a little bit sexy and we're cutting around, we see like hands on bums and, you know, everyone's got a bit close into it. And then we cut to a shot of the wall and there's just one bead of sweat dripping down the wall. And I was like, oh yeah, you could almost feel how warm it is in there. You can feel that hot heat.
I think that's a signature move of Super Queens. If you think about very much in contrast, very different setting, but in Hunger.
Tell me about one of the sensual details in Hunger.
I don't want to talk about it right now because I'm too happy to be in Lovers Rockland. Yeah. But there is, and also with Shame as well. I think that's what Steve McQueen does so well, is to like, you're right, it is very sensory, very sensual. It's always very the physicality of life and connection, kind of.
Yeah, it feels like part of his maybe where he comes from as like a film and video artist, as he made a transition to kind of straight fiction and drama, is this idea of like a bit more poetic, a bit more expressionistic use of like the camera and images, and that's the kind of stuff I bloody love. I also love the camera work, the cinematography. We had a very warm, appealing colour palette. The whole thing just had this warmth throughout it.
Yeah.
And I loved every time somebody would light a cigarette, their faces would light up with this beautiful orange like look, you know. So the colour palette had this like nostalgic golden feel to it, which helped make it feel appealing and warm. Even though it's set in a quite a rundown house, it feels inviting.
Totally.
And I loved there's just bunches of sequences that I love. There's one bit where it's a continuous take where the camera doesn't cut and they're playing like a track and the whole party keep requesting a rewind and the whole party are like they all gang up on the DJ and the whole like dance floor around them and they rewind the record, they start dancing and the cat doesn't cut away from them and they go back and demand a second rewind and it's like you are completely with the crowd in that moment. It like whips you up into the atmosphere that they did.
And in the middle, when they're singing, they're all singing along to Silly Games. You feel like you're in it with them. I think it's one of the most like moving scenes I've ever seen in a film because I think, especially I think the context, because it came out in 2020. I remember watching this in the second lockdown. So it's winter. It's cold. We're all very isolated, literally, from each other, and haven't been to a party in the longest time, probably for most of us, of our whole lives. And so watching that, I just remember thinking like, oh, it's like so moved by it, and just seeing it's amazing to capture. And I think I can't think of another film which really captures that kind of communal sense of when you're with a crowd all like feeling the music and loving being together. It's so completely special and so unique. And also it's really like, I love that it's part of the Small Axe series because James, you'll see when you watch the rest of the series, like that's a series which explores, because the kind of through line of that series is about like, I think it is actually, it's like mostly set in like 80s London, but amongst the like Afro-Caribbean community. So there are various plot lines that are very, very heavy and, you know, exploring obviously like racism and a lot of the difficulties of that time for the community. And this film, there are moments that touch on it. There's a moment where the kind of protagonist leaves the party or one of the protagonists leaves the party, and she kind of like encounters some racism just outside of the front door. Then she kind of comes back into the warmth environment of the party and is kind of back in the thick of it. And it's like, it shows the importance of community and like the kind of power of the party as something that is like a salve from these sorts of horrible aspects of life. And the episode does the same thing for this series. I think it's like an important part of it because it shows like the kind of amazing sides of life too, as well as the difficulty, you know?
Yeah, so and I love what you said about the healing power of the party, because there is a character who's like a bit of a disruptive, like slightly out of control presence who kind of gate crashes his way into the party, and you think it's going to kick off with him, you know, it's all, and he kind of does to a degree, but then he goes to the dance floor and he's dancing a bit too crazy, and then they kind of think someone's hands him a spliff and just says, hey, chill out, and then they get him kind of doing some MCing, some toasting over the dub reggae, and then he's like part of the gang then, and it's like the party soothed him, it absorbed him. And it just kind of, it didn't stop him, it just absorbed him and kind of took his energy and put it in the right place. And I loved that.
Yeah. And actually, what's the other thing that's really nice about it is, in a way, similar to 10 Things I Hate About You, but it's done so expertly. I think that's why Steve McQueen is such a good director for characters, is that there are like a number of different people. So there's a girl called Cece whose party it is. It's her 17th birthday party. So again, I was thinking, God, this is like the exact opposite of The Great Beauty as well, because we've got this like glamorous over the top party with this old guy, the 65-year-old guy who like thinks he's everything, and then there's this girl at the kind of start of her life, and it's her 70-year-old party, and it's so exciting. But then we have a couple of girls who come to the party, you don't really know anyone, and then there are some of the guys who come to the party, and there are all these different people, and they just have these like moments. So you get there like, they have their own plots going on that are like piecing together and interweaving, and they connect with each other as everyone's does at a small party. You know, of course, you're going to interact with other people, even if you don't know them yourself. And so it just very well like tells these stories. So we get to this point of like, and the cute romantic storyline between two of them. It's like, it's just so beautifully done.
Yeah, I absolutely loved it. I thought this was great, and I will be watching the rest of the series, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think I'm going to rewatch. It was so nice watching that again. It's so good, and such. I think for my birthday next week, I'm just going to like play the playlist from it, because that's the other thing. When I was thinking, okay, so what makes a really good house party scene or party scene? It's like we said, like feeling like you could be there. It's like a little bit believable, but also like dream-like and the kind of thing you want to be at, and has some aspiration to it in like an inviting way. But also you need excellent needle drops, you know?
Absolutely you do.
And both 10 Things I Hate About You and Lovers Rock, they really, in particular, they bloody nail it.
For me, Lovers Rock nailed it. It just made me realise, God, I haven't listened to some good reggae in a long time.
Yeah, I know. So good. Oh, I'm so glad you liked it. That makes me very happy.
Great film to round things off with.
Yeah, okay. So guys, those are our top 5 films. It was hard to come to a decision, but that's where we got to. 10 Things I Hate About You, Human Traffic. Why is it called Human Traffic, by the way?
I couldn't tell you, to be honest.
Because it's quite that sounds like a really heavy title. Like,
yes.
It's not what I would have guessed.
No, good point. It does, if you are just scanning through your movies to watch, might not stand out as something about the 90s club scene, yeah.
But yes, Human Traffic, The Great Beauty, Playtime, and Lovers Rock.
Yes, and if you've got any that you think we've missed or that should have been included in there, please let us know. We'd love to hear from you.
All right, so shall we take a trip to the film pharmacy?
Absolutely, yes.
All right, this is a good one, very appropriate for our subject matter this week. Hi, James and Lily. I've got a new projector and my birthday is coming up. What film would you recommend to have playing during the party? So no sound, but cool visuals.
Great question. This is playing right into my particular area of interest, which is the best quality picture and sound. But, you know, I have to say, Groovy Movies listener, I love the question, but I'm aching more detail. I want to know what kind of projector. Is it 4K? Is it laser? Has it got Dolby Vision? Because that will affect the optimal image to project on there for your party to look cool.
Can you do an answer for 4K and one for whatever another one is?
You damn right I can, Lily.
All right, hit me with them.
Okay, so I would say it's got to be a film that just kind of is more visually based. You don't want some dialogue talky drama. So I would perhaps go for, on Blu-ray, 1080p, I would, oh, by the way, listener, you are not streaming anything on your projector. If you want it to look good, you've got to get Blu-ray player secondhand or a 4K Blu-ray player brand new. Anyway, you want to be projecting Tree of Life in 1080p. That's Terrence Malick's, I think it's 2010, 2011, Brad Pitt, Jessica Chastain starring film about a man's childhood with an overbearing father figure. But it's got a beautiful 15-minute flashback that flashes back to the dawn of the creation of the universe and goes all the way through from the evolution of the dinosaurs, the destruction of the dinosaurs, to finally 1950s America.
So what are you thinking? Like, do you want to play that on a loop, or you just play out the film? Yeah?
No, that chunk. It's like a 15-minute chunk on a loop.
Is that an option?
That all depends on the player, but come on, you can just like click it back, rewind it, press the scene button.
You're asking our listener to every 15 minutes at his party or hers.
Theirs.
Click back to the start of this 15-minute scene.
Nothing worth having ever comes easy.
I love it because you know what, James, it makes me want to go to a party at your house. I want to see this kind of dedication to the form in person.
Well, if you came to Secret Cinema at the BIM Manchester Screen and Film School, you'd see me. I'm constantly in the pre-show before the film starts. I take the videos from one film or YouTube videos and I combine it with Dolby Atmos music for another input source. So you get like a sound and vision. So every 5 minutes, every time a song finishes, I've got to cue up the next video, got to change the next song. It's worth doing because it looks and sounds great.
Oh my God, I love this. Okay, I want to go to that. Did you have another one then as well?
I did, and I'm thinking something, well, I don't know, this is a bit of a curveball one. I'm going to stick at 1080p, and I'm going to say Tron in 3D. You need to get a 3D projector and some glasses, but Tron Legacy, the latest one. Terrible script, but the visuals, they are this neon kind of hyper-pop-looking image. Daft Punk turn up in their glossiest, silverest robot-looking. You know, you've got Michael Sheen playing essentially a riff on David Bowie from his Ziggy Stardust era. The visuals are eye-popping. And if you've got the 3D glasses, blow your mind. Look great on your projector. And you can run the whole thing from about the 30 minutes mark onwards without having to loop it. So you've got a 2 hour of neon-soaked visuals.
So you're asking your guests at the party to wear 3D glasses?
Now, the point I made earlier, nothing worth having ever comes easy.
Welcome. Now pop these on, shoes off, pop these on. There you go. Enjoy, guys, enjoy. Well, it's just for the background.
As I recall, the question is impressive visuals. If you want mediocre visuals, just stream something random off YouTube. Fine, done.
Oh my God, I love it. The funny thing is, I had the same thought, like I need more information, but not about the technology, about what kind of a party it is.
If you just want to click a button and put something surrealistic and strange and impressive looking, the colour of pomegranates would be a strong recommend. No 3D, no nothing. Just click play on the colour of pomegranates and you will have 2 hours of surrealistic visuals.
All right, that's cool. I've not seen any of these movies, so good job. The colour of pomegranate.
That's like a very surrealistic, purely visual kind of experiential movie. It's all very dreamlike logic. Nothing really makes any sense. It's perfect for putting up on a screen and having the sound off.
Okay, so when I was thinking about it, I thought genuinely, actually, Playtime would be ideal to have in the background. But obviously, we've just discussed that. So the other thing I was thinking was like any Studio Ghibli film would be great. Cool visuals, but it is quite plot-based. But I was struggling to think outside of that because then the other thing I thought of that I worry it might seem a bit pretentious, but I think would work really well is something like Modern Times, you know, the Charlie Chaplin film.
Yeah.
I like the kind of, I guess, jarringness or contradiction maybe of having kind of dance music or party music on and then having this black and white silent film. It's like a cool thing to have going, but it's not going to distract people from the party because, you know, it's a silent movie anyway. And I think it will just be a nice thing that people will see and be like, oh, that's cool. And then they'll go back to their friends.
Whereas I was thinking with Tron Legacy, it's more like having visuals to a futuristic disco.
Yeah, which I think is great. I feel like yours is like, futuristic disco. This is more kind of, I don't know, drinks, party. Maybe.
It's a bit more cocktail party vibe. Maybe Tron's a bit more, come on, let's have a bit of a rave going on. So depending what kind of atmosphere you want at your party, perhaps, you can choose from our selections.
Yeah, exactly. All right, well, thanks everyone for listening to another episode of Groovy Movies.
And if you can find your way to leaving a like or giving us a 5-star review, it all helps get our podcast out there.
All right, so see you in 2 weeks, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Follow us on Instagram at Groovy Movies Pod or email us groovymoviespod@gmail.com.
Groovy Movies was produced and edited by Lily Austin.
Music and sound by James Brailsford.
Our logo was designed by Abby Jo Sheldon.
For references and more information about the films discussed, check out the show notes.